All right, welcome to part two of the Pro Football Doc podcast for this week. Great to have that inside look at the FanDuel Sportsbook with John Sheeran. Thanks for joining us again after the break here. I feel like this week we have a lot to talk about. The title of this part is My Guy or the Best Guy, but we have a lot of things to talk about here. I feel like I've missed you guys. Last week, I thought was an awesome podcast. Chris Long, I mean, we could have gone for hours. Decided to make the whole podcast related to Chris Long and his opinions. But we missed out on some news, and it worked out well for me. I did take a quick little vacation with the wife, so it made life easier for me as well. So we got a lot to jam into this part two here. And we're going to start with My Guy or the Best Guy. And we'll touch on how the combines are being done. We'll touch on some of the COVID conclusions and good news going forward related to sports. And we'll talk about media and use the Tiger Woods example of A, how I do what I do, but B, how to sift through the misinformation, some of it that we've put out on some YouTube video and other things already. And then the ever popular What Happened Here, which is replacing our beast of the week in the off season, or this one could be a beast of the week one as well. So let's get into it here. My guy or the best guy. Here's what I mean. We've all been, I think, in work situations or school situations where a teacher gives favoritism to a student, or a boss gives favoritism to an employee, or when the new boss comes in and maybe you've been working hard for a number of years and being quite successful in sales as an auto mechanic or whatever it is, and you don't get the promotion, or they bring in someone over the top of you because you just don't know that new boss or the new situation. And we're all human and we all succumb to that, I think. Heck, when restaurants are open, and they're slowly opening up in California, you go in your restaurant, you kind of like your guy, your favorite waiter or waitress, right? Or as opposed to a new one. And that's good and that's correct here. But I wanted to talk about the My Guy or the Best Guy phenomenon here. And we know it happens in coaching, you know, the rehires and the links and so forth, who you know kind of thing. But it's even happening in the athletic training world some. We almost had something unprecedented. There's job changes every year, 32 NFL teams. Usually 3, 4, 5, or 6 head athletic trainer jobs change hands. And we had none this offseason until this last week. And I think we had none for a couple of reasons. One being, how do you fire an athletic trainer who did double duty for a whole season, took care of the training room as always, but then was essentially the point man on a lot of the COVID protocol stuff. And that was a full-time job. And so I thought we'd get through the season without any athletic trainer changeover because of that reason. And we talked about it on a podcast. But now there have been two. The Atlanta Falcons have released Marty Lazon, and the Jacksonville Jaguars have released Scott Trulock. And, that was announced officially this morning by Tom Pelissero. Full disclosure, and I'll look, I know Scott very well. I know Marty back from his days in with the Browns, but I don't know him as well. Scott, I know very, very well. Look, I would put Scott Trulock among the top athletic trainers out there. He's knowledgeable, he's academic, he has a great personality, he can get along with players, he's trusted by players. He's been in multiple different teams, including the San Diego Chargers as an assistant, then director of rehab in Tampa. Then he ran the program in North Carolina, and he's been with the Jaguars for quite a while. I don't think you can find a better athletic trainer out there. And I'm disappointed, yes, on a personal level for him, that he has been let go. But, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the My Guy or the Best Guy scenario. And by the way, Jeff Ferguson, who's taking his place, is excellent as well. So no slight there. At least they made a good choice. But here's what I mean, especially with athletic trainers, why my guy or the best guy is difficult. As an athletic trainer and in the training room, you have to have the trust of players. Players, if they don't trust you, will seek treatment outside, which then makes the rehab process a mess if there's not good communication. Players, if they don't trust you, won't give you the whole story. Either they'll, every time there's something not wrong with them, they'll make it into a bigger deal because they need to protect themselves, or perhaps they'll never tell you about small things that you can treat before they become big things, because they don't want it on the report and they don't want you running up to tell their coaches what's going on. So I've been there for 17 years, and it's a delicate balance. I can promise you there are things that a good athletic trainer doesn't relay to upstairs, and it keeps it in the family downstairs with the players. And the other thing is, and athletic trainers are one of the only members of the staff, sure, equipment guys, and yes, the training room usually is on the first floor, but usually they're, quote, downstairs. The athletic training room, the training room is the closest to the locker room pretty much always. And where we had it, and it's true a lot of places, you walk through the athletic training room to get to the weight room. So it's sort of a central hub, and it requires a lot of bit of confidence and trust there. So there's no question that if someone's not doing their job, they deserve to be let go. And sometimes it's just not a fit. But here's my opinion, having been there. And I don't know the inside situation with Jacksonville. All I know is here's an excellent athletic trainer. And from the outside, here comes a new head coach who is all powerful. Look, I don't personally know Urban Meyer, but I respect him. He's been successful a lot of different places. And I don't know the background story of how this all works and who made the decision. But one of the things I always say is, like, think of this in your work situation. What message does it send if the well-loved secretary or assistant, or the well-loved assistant store manager who works hard and is very dedicated, gets let go by the new manager, general manager, or boss, and gets switched, and it turns out, I mean, I think there's potential repercussions to that. I think the Jaguars need to be careful, and I'm sure they are, because I think Jeff Ferguson's a good hire. He came from the 49ers. I think he's a very good athletic trainer as well. But you need to stay away from the my guy phenomenon, especially in the training room. You got to have the best. And I'd say this for doctors too. You can't always get away with the hospital sponsorship doctor. You have to get the best doctor. Otherwise, you lose confidence. So I hope this is not happening in Jacksonville. I'm quite sure Scott Trulock will land on his feet. I'm sure he was treated with respect because he's done a good job for the Jaguars. I think he will land on his feet other places. Of course, you feel bad for anyone in their family when they end up having to move, et cetera. But I would caution teams to be careful about the my guy versus the best guy idea, because you want everyone to know that you want the best people, not just your people. Look, it trickles down to position on the playing field. Are you going to bring in your linebacker as opposed to I'm the best linebacker and I'm going to lose my job? Those are some of the repercussions that happen. And I actually think structurally and culturally, and I, at the Chargers over my time, we were not that good for a number of years, and there was a lot of turnover. I think it's really nice and symbolic almost when you retain someone who's not your guy, but who probably is the best guy, who's been doing a good job. It tells the team that you have a meritocracy there. And that's probably a good thing. That's how you get the most out of people. So Um, enough of that. Only two athletic trainer changes this year. Beware of my guy or the best guy, I think, in all our own personal lives and in football as well. All right, let's get to some other news stories here. We're going to talk a little bit about, let's go over the combines. What's going to happen at the combines? Right, the combines would have passed already. Remember, this marks the 1-year anniversary of COVID in the NFL. Last year, NFL got through the combines before COVID shut it down. So this actually completes the 1-year cycle of the NFL dealing with COVID. And yes, COVID did get the combines this year. There was no combines. So if you want to go to this Outkick article, we outline what happens. Instead of 330 prospective draftees going to Indianapolis with all medical personnel and coaches and position coaches and scouts and the whole deal, instead, it is every team will have about 10 or 11 players to go over, and they'll do it virtually, and they'll share that with everyone in the league. It'll be a virtual exam, Zoom, telemedicine, looking at studies, talking to players remotely. So every team will get 10 or 11 guys, in theory, regionally based, but clearly, like the Browns are going to probably get 10 Ohio State players, but the Rams and Chargers are going to get 10 each, and they're probably not going to be just from LA, right? They're going to be from different places, just a numbers game. Then what will happen is that normally there's a recheck combines early April, right before the draft. In a normal circumstance, of those 330, there'll be 40 or 50 or so guys that have pending issues, coming off an ACL tear and surgery, coming off shoulder surgery, coming off, who knows, a hamstring strain, or whatever it is. And teams want to reevaluate them right before the draft, their progress. Though they will fly out for a recheck combine first week of April, that first weekend. This year, that recheck will be different. That will be in person. Each team is going to send probably 2 people, head athletic trainer and head team physician, and they're going to look at those 40 or 50 rechecks. But then my understanding is the top 100 players will go. So basically, any projected day 1 or 2 pick, first round day 1, day 2 is round 2 and 3. So rounds 1 and 3 will all be required to go to what used to be the rechecks for a limited in-person exam, so teams get a better look at them. So we'll start talking about combines, free agent physicals, who's healthy, who's not. We'll go over all the quarterbacks from Tom Brady on down in their surgeries in the off season. We'll talk about Trevor Lawrence and his shoulder surgery in the upcoming weeks. But I wanted to cover that a little bit right here in terms of what the process is. All right. Another thing that we talked about and wanted to share with you all is that there was a nice study that I wrote about, which actually the conclusion is some of the COVID heart fears were unfounded. I'm not saying COVID's not real. I'm not saying inflammatory heart disease or myocarditis as a result of COVID is not real. It is. But any inflammatory condition, including influenza, can result in myocarditis. There was initial fear, and I wrote that article why the SEC was comfortable playing because of their screening initially, and the Big Ten wasn't, but then they reversed course. And I think the good news here, and here's the home run sentence, the NFL, Major League Baseball, NHL, NBA, WNBA, and MLS, 789 professional athletes tested positive for COVID. A total of 5 had inflammatory heart disease, 3 with myocarditis, and 2 had pericarditis. Look, thankfully, they were all okay and no long-term effects. And we don't know about long-term effects yet, right? Fully, but so far we haven't seen it. So the incidence is lower than thought. Yes, one is too high, but what's the normal incidence? We can get into all of that. The good news is we haven't seen a lot of it across 6 pro sports. And that certainly is good news. Not the full story, but good news. And hopefully, look, I hope you realize I've tried to provide some balance. I've said from the beginning that if you want zero tolerance, we shouldn't have played last football season. But if you're willing to undergo some changes and accept some risk, I thought we could complete the football season, and we did. So that's kind of where it lies. Look, if you want your own kid to have no risk for COVID, don't send them to school. Don't send them to any sports practices or team play. I have 8 and 3-year-old. The 8-year-olds are involved in some sports programs. And I think the risk is small, but worth it. And of course, we make sure that the sports that they're playing are doing it in the right way with rules to make sure there's no COVID. But anyways, just wanted to get that clear. The final topic before we get to what happened here and look at some video is this week released a video on YouTube on 3 pieces of information or 3 lies from Tiger Woods about Tiger Woods, not generated by Tiger, but just media information. The third, I think, is the most egregious. The first 2 I can understand. The first 2 were, one, they said both legs were broken. Look it up in the media. That's what everyone said. But the reality was it was multiple fractures in the legs, and it was all in the same leg in at least three different areas. But it got, in the game of telephone, misinterpreted to both legs. That got straightened out. And by the way, if you want to see this video, go to my timeline or the Pro Football Doc YouTube channel, this special video there. And maybe I'll put up the link, or my producer will put the link on the bottom of this, or what have you. The second thing is that he had an early transfer to Ronald Reagan UCLA Hospital in Westwood. And that was a misunderstanding by the media. He was taken to the trauma center, Harbor UCLA, where I worked before for the X Games, et cetera, Harbor/UCLA. And I think some media, national media, probably didn't understand Harbor is part of UCLA. So I think they saw UCLA at one point and said, oh, he must have been transferred to Westwood. Harbor, UCLA are the same facility. So that was a lie. But the biggest one is that Tiger didn't want his kids to visit him at the hospital. Look, in non-pandemic times, kids have restrictions about who they can visit, especially if there's an open wound. In pandemic times, nobody can visit anybody. My mom broke her hip a few weeks back. I dropped her off at the emergency room. I wasn't the treating orthopedic surgeon. I couldn't go visit her in the hospital. So I just advocate for more truth in media. And there are times that I get things wrong and I try and admit it, but I do it from afar and the outside, and I don't report things as facts. And the final thing I'll say about Tiger that I think is a misconception out there. There are some out there that say that they're still like making the assumption that perhaps he will, there's a tox screen coming. There's not a tox screen coming for several reasons. Look, first of all, someone should be presumed innocent, even though he's had a previous history of some issues. And I'm not trying to defend Tiger or accuse Tiger. I'm just telling you there's not going to be a tox screen coming. Why? When you're trapped in a car and you utilize jaws of life to extract them in a crush injury like in Tiger's situation, and I verified this with the fire chief battalion chief, that he basically said very high chance that they got a victim would get medication, morphine or something like that, prior to the extraction. Why? Number one, they're in a lot of pain and it's compassionate. Number two, you want to keep them calm during the extraction process. Number three, when they are freed, the limb, in Tiger's case, is dangling there. There's no way to support it immediately, and it's quite painful. So it is the compassionate and right medical thing to do in those circumstances for the paramedic to administer some medication. Once they administer medication, whether the sheriff or police wants blood or not, and by the way, it's routine when you get to the hospital to get a tox screen anytime there's a car accident, that tox screen becomes invalid. It's a sample that's been, quote, legally considered tampered with. So we're not going to find out any tox screen results. That's going to stay within the bounds of HIPAA for Tiger. I'm not saying Tiger's getting away with taking medications or being drunk or anything like that. Not at all. I'm just saying we're not going to get any tox screen results either for exoneration or making him liable in some way, because that sample's been tampered with, quote, so to speak, legally tampered with, properly tampered with. And yes, you're asking yourself, well, what difference does it make if he has a high blood alcohol content and he got morphine? Well, tampered is tampered, and it doesn't have to be morphine metabolites. If he had other drugs in his system unrelated, bottom line is you can't rely on that test from a legal perspective. And once again, I want to be clear, I'm not accusing Tiger of, having done anything. I'm just trying to clear things up in the media. So finally here, let's get to what happened here. And since there's no football, but there's a lot of other sports, we'll talk about what happened here. And this might be a beast of the week as well, but don't look away if you're a little squeamish, especially guys. So some of you may have seen this, but here is Alexander Ovechkin against Travis Frederick with the little stick to the groin. And I think we all jump a little bit there. Obviously, who can blame Travis Frederick for going down? And I'm not trying to comment legal, illegal, who's right, who's wrong, but the bottom line is, thankfully, unlike football players, hockey players wear cups. Can you imagine a puck hitting you in the testicles? I mean, that would be extremely traumatic. Obviously, this stick without a cup would be very much more painful than what it looks like. But thankfully, they do wear cups. And part of it, that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Look, I haven't played hockey. My understanding is the cups are different than in other sports, smaller. And so you end up getting what's called a nut concussion. Just like a helmet a helmet prevents skull fractures very well, but it doesn't prevent concussions. A cup prevents losing your testicles and they're exploding from trauma. And you can imagine even that stick or any puck would do that, but it doesn't stop the concussion effect or a nut concussion, etc. So still quite painful there. Anyways, lots to talk about, could go on for a long time. We'll keep it to our usual 20-25 minutes per segment. Thanks for watching the Pro Football Doc podcast. We're going to start some new videos during the week on the YouTube, etc. Instead of, I think people like the video articles as opposed to written articles. Always lots to talk about. Special thanks again to FanDuel and John Sheeran, who is our guest this week. And thanks for watching the Pro Football Doc podcast.